Welcome back to the Connected podcast. I'm thrilled to bring you an extraordinary collection in which some incredible students take the driver's seat and host dynamic conversations with professionals from across the higher education sector, discussing the vital topic of student belonging. Bringing us another fabulous episode is Gem Standen, who is joined today by Vicky Blacklock from Northmbria University. Vicky's role sits within the Student Library and Academic Services Department, and she describes herself as a third space professional, spanning academic and professional services.
Would you mind just briefly explaining a little bit about the scheme that you've told us about and what you're going to be talking to us about today?
Yeah. So my main area of focus at Northmbria is the Student Inclusion Consultant Scheme. Effectively, it's allowing students from underrepresented groups to have a voice, to share their experience of what it's like to be a current student at Northmbria University, and the impact that their lived experiences had on their access to and retention and progression within university, leading ultimately to good graduate outcomes. So they provide the sort of nuance behind the data that we have on our students. I recruit them every year, at the start of every academic year, from every faculty, from every entry point. It's a scheme that's funded through our access and participation plan. So there are sort of regulatory requirements in that sense, that they are undergraduate students, home students. But that said, I try and encompass the breadth of the student population where I can, certainly from an academic discipline, and also that lived experience, whether it's mature students, commuter students, those with care and responsibilities. The role is a paid role, which is really important to the university, to me, and to the students. They are paid for their time and for the work that they do, whether it's the same as a staff member would be, whether it's a meeting, whether it's research they're doing outside the role, whether it's attending an event or a conference. So that adds a sort of, for the students, a value to what they do. And the intention, one of the intentions with that, is that it sort of empowers them to feel that actually they are important and they do make a difference.
That sounds brilliant. Going to ask a few questions now, if that's all right. Just further around your scheme, could you provide a little bit more information about what you mean by differential student outcomes and why they matter for students' experiences and future?
Yeah, sure. So when I talk about differential student outcomes, I'm referring to the different access, success, progression and retention experienced by students from different groups. I think I touched on that before. So for example, a student's socioeconomic background, ethnicity and disability, which can all play a really significant role in how they experience higher education at various points. As to why this matters, it's important that a university understands its community so that interventions can be put in place that might address these. And this would ultimately make the student experience more inclusive and equitable. And this is more likely to sort of contribute to good graduate outcomes and social mobility. And at Northumbria, that's one of our key drivers of our strategy, is social mobility. So an additional example to the Student Inclusion Consultant Scheme of this is a package of support we've got called And You Belong, which provides financial and welfare support for our students who are care experienced, who have care and responsibilities, or who are estranged or sanctuary scholars. So that's not something I directly deliver, but I work within the sort of department that provides that support for students, and that makes a really big difference as well to students from those groups.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So with that being said, how do you go about identifying where outcomes or experience gaps exist, and what kind of evidence or data do you use?
So when students enrol at Northumbria, there's an optional set of questions for students to complete. So it includes categories that are not otherwise collected for HESA purposes. So this is whether a student is first generation, care experienced, or whether they were eligible for free school meals. And in the 2023-24 academic year, over 90% of our students who responded identified as being from at least one of these groups. Obviously within that, there's a lot of intersectionality as well. So the intention of collecting this data, which we refer to as diversity monitoring, is to enhance the quality of our provision, in particular to identify and address these differential student outcomes and experiences. Using that, we embed student voice into academic and professional services practice. It's a priority at Northumbria, and the insight of the students provides nuance behind that and helps us to understand those student experiences on a sort of more micro level as well.
Excellent, thank you. What kind of barriers do students from different backgrounds face that might affect their outcomes or how they feel included? I'm sorry, I think that does overlap a little bit with what I've previously asked, but yeah, ultimately, if there's any sort of poignancy in the groupings that you've encountered during your time in your role.
Yeah, no, it is a good question, and I was thinking about this earlier on. I think, and you know, some of these barriers would be the same as students who don't identify as sort of being part of a group, but I think financial barriers and typically as well time-based. So financial barriers could be more pertinent for, as I say, students from a sort of low-income household, low participation neighbourhood, for example. Time barriers could be for commuter students or those who have care and responsibilities, or you know, perhaps not as explicitly, but mature students perhaps have parental responsibilities. They might have another job. You know, there could be a lot of other additional considerations that students are balancing alongside their studies. So at Northumbria, we ensure we've got a sort of inclusive approach to teaching and learning, and this caters to different learning styles and needs to help eradicate these barriers or address these barriers, at least on a sort of curriculum level. So by sort of embedding that inclusive approach at the design stage, you could save somebody time, you know, precious time that actually it's a really clear brief or it's a really clear assessment, so I can just get straight on with it rather than spending additional time in the library doing X, Y, and Z, for example. On the financial side, we've also worked with a company called Black Bullion, which is a financial platform, and it helps students to develop financial skills and confidence, with the intention being that's whilst they're on course at university, but also once they graduate. So it's sort of having that financial education alongside their discipline.
Oh, that all sounds so amazingly holistic and just a really wonderful package for students. How does your work help? And again, I think you partly answered this in the last question, but how does your work help make the university a place where all students feel that they can succeed and belong?
Yeah, I think probably the best example, the best example that I can talk about is the student inclusion consultant scheme in that sense. Like I said, with a couple of restrictions just through the way it's funded, it is an opportunity that's open to all students to apply. And I usually recruit around 20 students per academic year, from foundation years through to sort of final year students. And one of the sort of ways that I found to be really effective is to work alongside our access team who sit within our marketing department, so that those students coming through a supported entry scheme are offered a guaranteed interview to join the team. So when they're having sort of familiarisation visits to campus and experience days, etc., and they're sort of transitioning into university, they get to know me, they get to know students that are currently doing the role to understand a bit more about it. And you know, they can perhaps see themselves doing that sort of thing when they get to university, knowing that they've got a guaranteed interview. And we also provide that signposting and support to our graduate futures team to sort of, you know, if they've maybe not had an interview before, if they're not sure how to do an application form, and they can do mock interviews. So it's that sort of really rounded support before they even get to university, so that when they arrive here, they feel that even more that sense of belonging and affiliation to the university, that yeah, I do want to share my experiences, and you know, I do trust the staff members that work here, that I can share this experience with them, and something is going to be changed as a result of that. A positive change is is always the intention, but it's they do act as a critical friend, really. Like they students put this sort of offer a lens that we wouldn't otherwise have as a university. When you look at data sets, you can make assumptions about things and you do see trends and patterns, but having that sort of sort of deeply felt experience shared to underpin the sort of widely felt theme is really, really valuable. And a lot comes out of that sort of discussion and dialogue with students that might otherwise be overlooked.
Brilliant. And that sort of relational pedagogy as well really is quite important for a lot of students in terms of establishing that belonging, and also for staff as well in supporting the students. So with that being said, what does it look like when students and staff work together to improve student experience overall?
Yeah, so embedding sustainable partnership is really important, and it requires that sort of working and learning to be part of the culture and the ethos of the institution. We're really fortunate at Northmbria University that this is central to our education strategy, and we've got senior buy-in at exec level. So that hasn't been a challenge, but it does take time, and it takes energy and time and commitment to sustain that as well from the student side and the staff side. So beyond the student inclusion consultant scheme, there's a number of ways that staff and students work in partnership, both within and outside of the curriculum. And what this looks like can differ across faculties and departments, but the thread is always about improving the student experience for students now and in future. There's obviously many benefits to that. So from the student side, it's an increased confidence, it's development of experiential learning skills, and the opportunity to make a difference, which I found is often the motivation for a lot of students beyond the financial incentive. It's that legacy that they can leave in sort of enhancing the student experience. And then obviously for staff, it's that current student lens, which can sort of empower them to enhance their practice as well.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Can you share an example where a student or student input changed the direction of project or intervention?
Yeah, so currently we're planning for our 2025-26 induction and welcome week activities. I say we, it's a very much a collective piece from different stakeholders internally. But what's core to this is student reflections from those who attended last year's events. It's having a massive impact on the direction that we're taking it this year, ensuring an inclusive approach, particularly from neurodiverse students, that's considered as well. So definitely those reflections are being embedded at the outset, so that come September, October, hopefully it'll be a really positive experience for everybody.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, and I think a lot of students who do report feeling like a bit of an afterthought will appreciate that sort of approach being taken.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was going to say in some of the sort of enhancements or adjustments that can be made at so simple but can make a huge difference. And so we're very much listening to what students are saying and yeah, sort of acknowledging that these events and activities are for students, so they know best as to what works and what doesn't. So it every day, like the student insight is really valuable to not only to me but colleagues as well across the university.
I agree. You said you take an evidence based approach. How do you balance the use of data with the need to listen to the individual student stories you're given?
Yeah, so I know you mentioned earlier that you sort of are really interested in the qualitative side, and I think it's really important to adopt that alongside the quantitative approach when sort of designing interventions. And so yeah, it's closely linked. I guess what I said before, it's about understanding in more detail those sort of widely owned but deeply felt experiences. Um, so an example would be that almost half of our students are commuter students, which is yeah. So
That's
that's what
masses. Yeah, that's a lot of people.
it is. It's huge, and I think that's sort of I think we're the biggest. We have the biggest number of commuter students in the northeast out of the sort of northeast universities. So obviously that's really significant voice, collectively. So we do have in the team this year quite a few student inclusion consultants who are commuter students. Some are closer geographically to the campus than other students, but a lot of the experiences are the same, particularly around that sense of forming friendships and that sense of belonging and feeling that they should be there. So what we're doing, we're exploring that in more detail with those students to try and understand what they want and what would make a difference to them, whether it's a sort of commuter space on campus, whether it's social events and activities at certain times, whether it's creating a community for fellow commuter students from certain areas. So yeah, so that's I suppose an example where we've got all this data telling us this, and then speaking to commuter students, and then obviously getting them to reach out to their peer networks as well, can help underpin where we go next with providing that support and those interventions.
Brilliant. And yeah, no, that's massive as well. I'm a little jealous, if I'm being honest with you. We have such every year is different with our commuter students because East Anglia is huge and there aren't as many universities around for people to sort of opt for. So we still have a lot of people that will move to campus, but also a lot that commute. And often joining people up can be really, really tricky if they're not
Yeah,
around as often, and that's completely fair enough too.
yeah.
So what kind of interventions have proven most effective at closing gaps in experience or outcomes for you so far?
Yeah, I think it's taken that collaborative approach between sort of staff and students that tends to be the most effective. So one of the activities that our student inclusion consultants can undertake is to be part of a reciprocal mentoring scheme. So those students that are already sort of trained and familiar with the role of an inclusion consultant, after a couple of months, they can be matched with a senior member of university staff who's in a position where they're in a decision-making position. So it's they're sort of partnered together to have really meaningful and impactful conversations where the student knows that actually they're speaking to someone at this level, where if a student shares something with them, as long as they're comfortable to do so, it could be even something like, oh, did you know that in this part of campus the computer systems aren't working as they should, it doesn't have software as they should, and if that staff member happens to work in the department that addresses that can be quite an easy win for them to just change that, and it makes a massive difference to those students. So yeah, they have sort of these authentic and meaningful conversations which are structured around shared objectives. And yeah, some real impact happens off the back of that. We also had a couple of years ago, the head of the accessibility team took part in that, and he was partnered with a student down at our London campus, and she shared insight onto the importance of what it would have meant to her to have a accessibility advisor down, a named contact in London, because a lot of our staff and a lot of our students are based in Newcastle, and she didn't feel it was a sort of equitable experience, and so it really made the sort of head of accessibility review that situation, and as a result there's now a named contact down there to sort of provide that same consistent level of support for students at London.
Fantastic. And what a inclusive and impactful approach to helping students have their say. It's a really interesting way to garner student voice.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, I just thought of
No,
another
please do go ahead.
example.
I'm an so I'll say a lot.
No, it's so a current example. So we've got our dean of students, and she's been partnered with a student who's estranged, and they've had some really powerful conversations around what the experience is like for an estranged student, and how certain things can be really challenging that you might not consider if you haven't got that experience. So having a guarantor for moving into accommodation, for example, if you're estranged, that can be really challenging. And obviously, you need to have somewhere to live. So they've been having discussions around sort of those gaps, and they're working together to try and identify ways to address them. And they're going to be speaking together at a conference taking place at Durham University next month to sort of talk about that partnership and what they've achieved as a result of that. So yeah, it's really fascinating, sort of being able to facilitate those conversations and provide that environment for those conversations to take place.
And often for the students, that's going to be the first time that they're going to potentially have those opportunities to sort of have their voices heard at that level, and that experience they can take away to enforce their outcomes as well is really impactful.
Oh yeah,
I love the sound of that. It just sounds fantastic, Vicky.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting, and it's all about sort of that developing the students beyond the curriculum as well. Often students who have graduated, who have gone on to sort of obviously be interviewed for jobs and things, have reported that they're asked a lot about the student inclusion consultant role more than anything else that they've done at university. Not always, but often, and I think because it's quite unique. It's a unique opportunity, and it's paid, so it is distinct from other sort of student voice mechanisms that exist. And like I say at the start of the interview, it's more sort of they feel what they're sharing means something, and they take a professional approach to it because they're being paid. And it's what employers want to hear as well. And it could stand them out, even something as simple as them knowing how to write an email properly, or have correct Teams etiquette, or meeting deadlines, or turning up on time, things like that are so important to whatever workplace they go into or whatever they go on to do next. So I think that sort of, when they're having those conversations with university staff at a senior level, that's further developed as well. It's their communication skills and their confidence in speaking to people at a senior level it's really important.
I agree entirely. In terms of celebrating and scaling, your good practice, how do you find and share this practice across the different departments in your university, or the areas of the university in which you work?
Yeah, so at Northmbria we've got a community of practice for innovation in teaching and excellence. Innovation in Teaching and Education, which is shortened to CIT. So that's made up of academic and professional services staff who sit within learning circles. And the intention is that these circles provide opportunities for colleagues to coalesce around areas of interest, to develop and showcase their expertise, and identify opportunities and tackle educational issues that currently challenge us at Northumbria and beyond in the sector, whether nationally or internationally. So within that, I'm the deputy chair of the Students as Partners Learning Circle, and I find this to be a really important way for me to share my good practice as well as learning from other people within the same learning circle or within other learning circles. It's very much a sort of collegial approach to sharing and learning. And we do invite students into that space as well. They're a really important part of the community. So they are interdisciplinary and work collaboratively, sharing good practice locally, and it definitely informs university strategy, and thereby sort of also enhances institutional policy and practice. it can also be beneficial to those colleagues working in academic space to sort of who are developing grant applications and publications as well. So that's I've found that to be a really good sort of platform for sharing.
That sounds amazing. I would literally, yeah, I would love, yeah, yeah, that would have been absolutely something that I, yeah, would very much enjoy doing as well. So, no, what a brilliant opportunity for staff and students to sort of learn from each other collectively. I just, yeah, this sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
It's really good. I can always keep you in touch about it because we sometimes have sort of
Please.
guest speakers and yeah.
Yes,
It's
please. I
it's an
love that.
open space, yeah.
Other things that you've seen work really well in one area that you think should be embedded more widely?
Yeah, I think the principles of sort of students as partners working is really strong for me. It's a really good foundation. So from, I mean, again, speaking of sort of the bread and butter that I know best from student and staff feedback and my own
Yeah.
reflections and observations, I think the scheme works really well. It's in its fourth year now. So it's demonstrated its sustainability as a business as usual practice, and it's been integral to the education strategy more broadly. So I would like to scale it up and recruit more students from different entry points to allow insight to be embedded. And it is a sort of student inclusion consultants are accessed widely across disciplines and professional services, but you know, the nature of students having other commitments, academic and otherwise, it it's sometimes a challenge to get everyone in the room at the same time, if for want of a better phrase. So I would love to have a bigger team and yeah, and just be able to sort of provide those students and those staff members with the opportunities to share that insight and just sort of further learn and develop from each other.
Oh, it would be amazing if we all had endless resources, wouldn't it?
Well, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Sometimes there aren't enough hours in the day.
I know there's not, but there's always a really strong appetite from the students to be an inclusion consultant. So, you know, it has taken time and it's taken sort of a lot of energy and effort, but it's brilliant. Like you know, it's from myself and the students. We really like it, and there's always this you know, it's always a sad time of year selfishly now because I'm going to lose a lot of students because they're graduating, and that's you know, they're flying the nest, and that's great. And but at the same time, it's like, okay, now you get to know a new group of students and develop them, and do they think, and because it is a very student-centered scheme, you know, new insight might not think the way things have been done works as effectively, and I'm absolutely open to that. And it is a really sort of flexible scheme and responsive and very much takes into account people's different learning styles and in terms of how they work with staff and how they want to sort of present the result of that working, to speak very broadly. And it's also very inclusive on the staff side. So it's not I know I touched earlier on sort of exec level staff taking part in the reciprocal mentoring scheme, but on other ways, there are other ways staff can work with inclusion consultants, and it's very much open to staff of any grade and working in any area. So it's fully inclusive on that front as well. So yeah, that would be my intention, really just do more of this, but bigger.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, especially for more like junior staff or people looking for other work experience. And yeah, no, I really love that. I really, really love that. So again, I think you've partly answered this as well. But what would a truly inclusive university look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I really like this question. And I think it was harder to answer than it might first appear.
It sounds like a simple
So,
question, but it's not. It's a very loaded one, so I apologise. But
no,
yeah, I think you've answered this in parts throughout. But yeah,
yeah, I think for me, so the way I thought best to answer this, I think, I mean, there's many ways, but anyway, I think one where inclusive design is considered and implemented at the outset, to reduce the need for adjustments to be made later on, whether that's, you know, in curriculum, whether it's extracurricular, whether it's the design of the campus, whether it's the marketing materials. So yeah, not just from a learning and teaching perspective, but beyond the classroom as well. I've recently completed a Universal Design for Learning qualification, so I intend to use that in my practice more to make sure I sort of lead by example when enhancing inclusion at Northumbria. So for me, if it looks inclusive and it feels inclusive and it's been designed inclusively, then that's going to be a big step towards making a truly inclusive university. But sort of with the caveat that you can always do better, and what's inclusive for one person might not be for another. So it's just having that sort of growth mindset about what an inclusive university looks like, I think.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic answer. And I think it really truly encapsulates sort of everything that you do within your scheme, with gaining that student insight to help you keep on improving and building on that knowledge and your inclusivity as well. And it certainly sounds like you're on a well, it's always going to be a very long journey for all of us to get to a place where it's truly inclusive. But yeah, it sounds like you're very much on the way there. So brilliant. What advice would you give to students who want to be part of shaping a more inclusive and equitable student experience?
I think so a lot of the students I work with and I meet are also reps, whether course or department reps. And I think that's a really good way to get that experience of contributing to the feedback loop. So I'd suggest contacting the Students' Union to see what opportunities are there. Obviously, there's also SAB roles as well. And I think, I know this sort of universities spend their access and participation plan funding in various ways. So I know that this type of opportunity of the inclusion consult scheme might not sit elsewhere, but it's worth contacting the sort of student welfare team or student life and wellbeing team, or what that sort of equivalent named team within a university, if you are a student, to just see what opportunities there might be. And it could be that that department hasn't thought of doing something like this before, but I think I would suggest a students' union, and then just being sort of quite using their initiative to try and network and find out how best to make those changes.
Brilliant, thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and for sharing the details of your scheme with us. It sounds absolutely phenomenal, and I'm sure that listeners are going to really benefit from hearing about your scheme. So thank you.
Thank you. No, it's been lovely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Connected podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out the rest of our extraordinary Voices of Belonging collection and stay connected.